So this is piece 22, Akenahten, Nefertiti, and Three Daughters. It is the first piece after 1700 years that shows change in Egyptian art. Remember the palace or the palette of King Narmer back to 3000 BCE. This is 1700 years later, 1300 BCE, and let's look at what they've changed. We're going to start with context first this time. The pharaoh that is responsible for this art, it was originally named Amenhotep, which means the Amun-Re god. He was a follower of the Amun-Re god, or at least his parents wanted him to be. So he was Amenhotep the fourth, but he changed his name to Akenahten, and that means one who is pleasant to Aten. So he is transforming the religion of Egypt from worshiping Amun-Re to worshiping Aten, the sun god. Remember back to this processional that came out of the temple of Amun-Re, that was ended during Akhenaten's rulership. And instead, this is Akhenaten, or Akenahten, excuse me, and this is the sun, its rays, and here is Akenahten's wife Nefertiti, and these are the sun's rays. More context, not only did he change the religion, he also changed the art and the representation of leaders. So here is King Menkaure and Queen, and now here is the representation of a pharaoh. This is Akenahten here. He not only changed the art and the religion, he also changed the location of the capital. So for the longest time, Thebes here had been the capital, and we had the Temple of Amun-Re at Karnak right next to Thebes, and Luxor right next to Thebes. And now Akenahten has moved the capital up here to Amarna. So today it's completely wiped off the map. There's only a little bit of a remains left, but he's doing a lot of changing. Furthermore, he suggests in this new religion that he's proposing that he and his wife are the only representatives on earth that the god would relate to. And so it's through them that you get to the religion, which then explains why this art that we're studying. So let's look at the form of our art piece. Here it is. This is a stele. It is standing on its own, and it is sunken relief. So they're carving into the piece. They're not taking away the negative space. They're leaving it there. And we have two seated adults on little thrones. We have three smaller figures. This is 1, 2, 3. And we have lines or rays from the sun coming down. And at the top of the piece, we have cartouches. These are names written in hieroglyphics. And we have a sun here that's sunken in. Also notice we have this outline. This indicates that we are in some kind of room. We're going to see that again. Then more about form, we have for these people, we have rounded bellies, we have elongated faces. Look how long their faces are. Their arms. Take a look at these arms. These are not the buff arms of Menkaure anymore. They're thin, they're disproportionately kind of small. And then we have a composite view. We have a profile of the bodies, and then we have the shoulders facing us frontally, and then we have a profile of the face, the head, but the eyes are shown in their entirety on the side, and you don't see that when you do a profile of yourself. You just see a part of the eye. And now that's standard in Egyptian art before this. Okay, function. The function of this is that it would have been placed in someone's house in Amarna, most likely, and it was an altar that someone would worship. Let's look at the content. There's a fair amount here. We see a family in a domestic setting, right? As I said, this outline represents the fact that we're probably in some sort of building a room. And we have three daughters being held. Here's the eldest. She is kissing her dad, and her arm, finger, hand is pointed at her mother. Second daughter is on the mother's lap, Nefertiti's lap. And here again, the arm is pointing at the other adult in the room, her father, the pharaoh Akenahten. And sitting on Nefertiti's shoulder is the third daughter, and the third daughter's hand is reaching up, touching that earring, playing with it. So we have this pretty domestic scene. We see an equally domestic scene right here. Notice the size of the adults in comparison to each other. Content, a little more detail here. The sun that is carved in this sunken relief has a little cobra's head at the bottom of it. Now, this harkens back to, this is King Tut and Autumn. And on the top of King Tut's coffin cover, we see this cobra. So those were what pharaohs wore on their head. And you can see that here as well. Coming from the sun, we have these rays, and at the end of the rays, we have these little hands. If you can imagine your hand like a clamshell opening up, that's what these hands are looking like. And at the bottom of some rays, we have the Ankh. The Ankh is famous in Egyptian art and religion. It is the sign of life. Here we see two gods, the god of Anubis here, and I forgot her, holding the Ankh, and they're giving life here into this pharaoh. And so in this piece, the Ankh is also going to Nefertiti's nose and Akhenaten's nose, giving them life. More content. Nefertiti's throne. Do you remember here back in the palette of King Narmer, this piece right here, the papyrus, representing some, the swamps of lower, and even the papyrus was actually lower and upper Egypt, but this representing lower Egypt, and the falcon was pulling life out of the nose of the representation here of Lower Egypt, the people of Lower Egypt. And so here we have the same thing going on. We have Lower Egypt being represented with these papyrus, and then Upper Egypt here, and it's a little more difficult to see. But this notion would be that Nefertiti is sitting on the throne of all of Egypt. And so these two, just like they get the representation for Aten, the sun god, they also are ruling jointly this Egypt. Okay, we see change and we see continuity. This is one of our essay styles. We see change here with this art, but what has remained the same? We need to talk about that in more depth. And then attribution. If you saw a piece like this in downtown Spokane, like I did in this like used furniture warehouse store, how would you know that that is the Amarna style? Attribution. And then finally, a tidbit here. Akenahten is an opera that is showing in London in 2021. This is a rather famous story, the adoption of a one God religion. And so it resonates throughout history.